Welcome back, prog fans. I was just going through my progressive rock collection and I was wondering, where did prog rock come from? In a previous episode, I talked about what I thought, in my opinion, was the first prog song, which was the Doctor Who theme produced in 1963. If you haven't seen it, then please check it out. It is also widely accepted within the prog community that King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King is the first true progressive rock album that was ever released in October of 1969. So what happened between those two significant moments in music history? Well, we can certainly give credit to the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds and Beatles' Sgt. Pepper for pushing music forward, but what really set the foundation for progressive rock? In this episode, we are going to explore 10 albums that did just that. I'll see you on the other side of the title sequence. I'm going to split the episode into two parts. The only major criteria I had was that it had to be released before In the Court of the Crimson King. The albums are in order of release from earliest to latest. So sit back and enjoy the journey. The Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd emerged from the psychedelic underground with the release of singles Arnold Layne and See Emily Play in the first half of 1967. In March of that year, Floyd began their studio sessions for their first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, produced by Norman Smith at EMI Studios, better known as Abbey Road Studios. The studio was the perfect fit, offering a wide variety of instruments, which can be heard as sound effects throughout the album. The difficult task ahead of the band was taking their live improv performances and shortening them into 3-minute tracks that were more concise. When The Piper at the Gates of Dawn was released, it reached number 6 on the UK charts and would go down as a definitive Floyd album. Unfortunately, singer-guitarist and main composer Syd Barrett had a sharp mental decline soon after and was replaced by David Gilmour by 1968. It took a few years, but Pink Floyd would, of course, find their footing as Roger Waters took over the reins as the main songwriter, releasing some of the most iconic progressive rock albums of all time. Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. The loss of singer-guitarist Denny Laine and bass player Clint Warwick, as well as getting out of a contract with the Beatles' manager Brian Epstein, spelled certain doom for the Moody Blues. They would recruit John Lodge on bass and, with the help of the Animals' Eric Burdon, find singer-guitarist Justin Hayward. The Moody Blues agreed to record an adaptation of Antonin Dvorak's Symphony No. 9, but instead they recorded Days of Future Past, which took the listener from morning to night, featuring songs like Tuesday Afternoon and Nights in White Satin. Not only was the album accompanied by orchestrations from conductor Peter Knight, keyboardist Mike Pinder introduced the group to the Mellotron after working for developer Streetly Electronics. The Mellotron is basically a playback tape recorder and a keyboard and was used moving forward for all orchestrations, giving the band their signature sound. The Moody Blues moved seamlessly into the progressive rock era in the early 70s. We're Only in It for the Money by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. The cover of We're Only in It for the Money looks like a clone of Sgt. Pepper's Gone Wrong. If the cover didn't tell you that this album was a full-on satire, then the music would. Zappa would heavily target hippie culture and politics. What makes this album stand out is its editing, with one song running into another, sometimes rather abruptly. Also, to the delight of anyone with an attention deficit, most tracks clock in at under 3 minutes, making it very fast-paced. To say this album is psychedelic and experimental is an understatement. Voices were even recorded into piano strings for a weird echo effect. Unfortunately, farther editing took place when, unbeknownst to Frank, an MGM executive misinterpreted lyrics and had the album censored before release. Frank Zappa would go on to influence many progressive rock artists. Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies. The Zombies would enter into the music scene after winning a competition for beat groups. The single She's Not There was released in mid-1964 with chart success in the UK and US. They would continue releasing singles and eventually the album began here with little success. Even though the songs were in the pop and R&B vein, Rod Argent always seemed to add a little something extra to his keyboard playing, pushing the music ahead of its time. Their second album, Odyssey and Oracle, saw the band update their pop sound with more psychedelic influences, creating a powerful collection of music. The most recognizable standout was the album closer, Time of the Season, featuring one of Argent's finest keyboard contributions. The song would eventually catch on, but not soon enough for the band to continue. Rod Argent would form a prog-related band, Argent, in 1969, which saw some chart success in the early 70s. Before I reveal the last Proto-Prog album on this video, I wanted to include a couple of honorable mentions. Mr. Fantasy by Traffic. When listening to Mr. Fantasy, one can immediately hear the music being pulled in two directions. Guitarist Dave Mason contributed more whimsical and psychedelic songs, while keyboardist-singer Steve Winwood had a more straightforward approach. Either way, the album worked, and the band would release some classic albums. Ars Longa Vita Brevis by The Nice. The title of The Nice's second album was Latin for Life is Short, Art is Long. Keyboardist Keith Emerson was already wearing his classical influences on his sleeve, including themes by Bach and Sibelius. Yes, that is a real x-ray of their bones, and yes, Emerson did discover he had broken ribs from his stage antics. Okay, back to the final album for part 1 of the video. Ogden's Nut Gone Flake by The Small Faces. The Small Faces were clearly shedding their early soul and R&B persona when they released the single Itchy-Coo Park in 1967. The song was more introspective and very experimental, featuring flanged backing vocals, drums, and cymbals opening up the listener's mind. In May of the following year, the band, consisting of Steve Marriott on guitar and vocals, Ronnie Lane on bass and vocals, Ian McLagan on keyboards, and Kenny Jones on the drums, released Ogden's Nut Gone Flake. Right from the opening of the album, the band was pushing boundaries. What really stands out was the concept centered around a character named Happiness Stan taking up the entirety of the second side. New Musical Express would even refer to the Small Faces as progressive pop. Soon Marriott would join Peter Frampton in Humble Pie, and the rest of the Small Faces would move on with Rod Stewart and Ronnie Wood dropping small from their name. Neither band caught the progressive rock bug. Don't forget to return for part 2. Please give this video a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.